Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
He modeled for me as a strong-willed child how to be a strong-willed adult in a godly way. And that's so important. Even when I talk to my parents of strong-willed kids today, I try to emphasize and say, you know what, you are the example. The strong-willed child is watching you. You don't realize it, but we're watching you at a very young age saying, oh, so that's how an adult settles conflicts. Oh, that's how much an adult goes to church. I've watched and I modeled and I learned that this is how you use your strong will. And if we had had an unhealthy relationship or done a lot of clashing, or he had done a lot of, just put me under his thumb, I know it wouldn't have turned out that way. But that's not how he did it.
And now for the next episode of Letters from Home, sending encouragement to your doorstep by capturing the heartbeat of God's people, one story at a time.
Hello, this is Meg Gleasner, your host. A strong-willed child. When was the last time you heard a parent say they have a strong-willed child and were just so happy about it? This phrase usually has negative connotations and thoughts that fill our minds. But what if it didn't? What if, upon discovering we had a strong-willed child, we rejoiced and knew that we had the tools to teach and guide that child well, and had great hope for the kind of force and strong-willed adult they could one day be for the Lord? Today's guest was a strong-willed child and is now that strong-willed adult, a humble force impacting our world for God's kingdom. In her story, you will hear the deep impact her loving father and upbringing made on her life, and how the Lord she has trusted in from youth has shaped who she is and how she ministers today. Here is the everyday extraordinary Cynthia Tobias. Cynthia, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. You came and shared at Alderwood Community Church when I was helping out as a mentor mom, and I went to your Sunday school class that you taught on parenting a strong-willed child and being a mother of 8. I have read so many parenting books, and I was sitting there with just only 2 kids left of 8, and I heard what you shared, and it impacted me so much. I just thought, why didn't I get to hear this before when I was just getting going? But I have to say, some of the wisdom and nuggets that I learned on that day and through what you shared at our MOPS group really has stuck with me, and I use it with my college kids or with myself, just so many things. And I just have wanted to have you on the podcast for a long time, because I know part of what you shared isn't just about parenting, but you have a story of what God's done in your life. And I'm just grateful that you're here and willing to share that today.
Oh, thanks, Meg. I'm always humbled to find out how God uses, obviously, what is his.
To God be the glory that anything that we share when God's leading us sticks with people. And I know at the MOPS group and my friends, so many things have stuck with them that you shared. So I know you live up in Bonney Lake, you and Jack, and you've been through many things in your life. And let's just start right at the beginning. So what was it like to grow up in your home? What is it like to be young Cynthia?
Well, my dad was a Nazarene preacher. And so we moved every few years, but he was a wonderful evangelical pastor. When I was in 5th grade, probably, we were in Reno, Nevada, and he came home one day, and he had just gone to this symposium on positive thinking. And he said, okay, from now on, we will be positive thinkers in this family. We looked at each other and went, whatever, what does that mean now? What has he got now? And he said, here's the jar. Every negative thing you say, you're going to put a dime in the jar. Well, we only didn't get much of an allowance, right? So we were broke in no time. I mean, my sister and I, she's 5 years younger. We did fight like sisters do. And so pretty soon we had to adapt it and say, okay, for every negative thing you say, you have to say 3 positive things. And pretty soon when we'd start to say a negative thing, we'd go, never mind, because I don't want to say 3 positives. and he would say, if you ask me in the negative, I'm not going to grant it. So I would say, I don't suppose you'd let me go to, and he would say no. I'd say, how can you say no right away? He said, because if you ask me in the negative, it's automatically going to be no. And so we learned from a very positive, and he was a holiness pastor. He really emphasized, the purity of heart and the purity of life. And I watched my dad be the very same in the pulpit as he was at home. And that impressed me. And at an early age, I came to know Christ. It has been solid. My mom and my dad, we had devotions every night. After dinner, we fought over who got to do the Bible reading versus who got to be doing the prayer and who got to read the devotion. So it was I wouldn't say idyllic, because obviously there aren't any. My dad had, he was on call 24 hours a day. We ended up in Las Vegas. Reno and Las Vegas were probably the two most difficult places to pastor ever. But I got a lot of spiritual field trips. I watched what God could do in broken, horrible, traumatic situations. I watched my dad be threatened by death 2 or 3 times and miraculously survive knife attacks or a gun threat.
What was the reason? Do you know?
Well, he would get calls and he would go out and try to help, like the addicts, or we had people in our church even that were, they would gamble and spend all their money and have to be rescued. And then he had me speaking when I was just 16. He said, why don't you go down and speak let's go down to the rescue mission where I speak. And he said, you can practice speaking. And I went, I don't have what I'm going to do at the rescue mission. He said, well, they have to listen to the preacher. They have to listen to the sermon before they can eat. So they won't be inattentive. They have to listen to you in order to eat. So that was,
captive audience.
Yeah. And, I'm a real strong-willed kid. My dad was real strong-willed, but he got my respect really early on. We were so close, right to the day he died when he was almost 92, just back in 2018. He died just about 1.5 years after my mom passed away. And so I just have an absolutely wonderful family legacy. I couldn't have asked for better parents. I miss them every day, but in many ways, I'm glad they're not here to have to go through what we've had to go through the last couple of years. My mom had some dementia, and it would have just been so devastating to them to go through 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, I hear you on that.
Yeah, and I really had some amazing experiences through the ministry. I had to do everything as a preacher's kid. Well, in case there's no one to play the piano, you have to take piano lessons. I don't want to take piano lessons. It doesn't matter. We need a Wednesday night pianist. And so my mom and I would have arguments, but I took piano lessons. And then when we moved, then we needed an organist. And I thought, how hard could that be? I could just learn the foot pedals. So I was church organist for my dad for 20 years. Church janitor, if nobody showed up, teach every single Sunday school class of any age. I was real uncomfortable with toddlers, so that was my least favorite at the time. But it's, you just, when you're pressed into service, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but I look back now and think how diverse and how much experience I got, even as a child, to figure out what do you need to do to meet the need. And God put me in so many places that later I look back at the tapestry woven through my life that makes me able to reach so many different types of people.
What was it about your parents that gained your trust, being a strong-willed child and being also like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this? What was it that broke through your strong will?
Well, I knew my dad loved me. Of course, my mom, she was a pushover. Because of course she loved me. And you know how there's always one parent that's kind of the pushover. But I couldn't bully my dad. I could not. And, even at a very young age, I learned that he spoke the truth in love. He was very firm. And we watched Bonanza every Sunday night. It was 9:00, but our bedtime was 9:30. And we had to stop halfway through the episode. So I would beg, cajole, demand. And it was always... he'd point to that watch and go, bedtime. But nope, 9:30. And he had that voice of authority. And I was punished, early on a little bit. Not rough, not horribly physically, but I knew who was boss. And I knew he loved me, and he did it because he loved me. And I've never, we were just, I don't have any complaints at all. He modeled for me as a strong-willed child how to be a strong-willed adult in a godly way. Mm. And that's so important. Even when I talk to my parents of strong-willed kids today, I try to emphasize and say, you know what, you are the example. The strong-willed child is watching you. You don't realize it, but we're watching you at a very young age saying, oh, so that's how an adult settles conflicts. Oh, that's how much an adult goes to church. I mean, I've watched and I modeled and I learned that this is how you use your strong will. And if we had had an unhealthy relationship or done a lot of clashing, or he had done a lot of, just put me under his thumb, I know it wouldn't have turned out that way. But that's not how he did it.
I remember that you said that at the MOPS time when you shared is as soon as you start wagging your finger, like you shouldn't do this, or why did you do this? And you go more direct with the strong-willed child. That doesn't work because they will fight you to the death every time.
Right. Plus, we will mimic you. If you think about it, if you're going to come at me with a bony finger and saying, why didn't you do this? And you know better than that. Then I'm thinking in my strong-willed head, even as a small kid, okay, so that's how you argue. And when you're upset with somebody, that's how you talk to them. And so if you hear a strong-willed child saying things like that, you can usually be pretty assured that that's what they've been hearing from the adults in their life.
Does your sister feel the same way about your parents?
Absolutely. She was the more compliant one, right? She didn't cause any trouble at all. You just had to look at her crooked, and she would be, punished, and she would want to go to her room and read her book. And she, people will say, didn't you feel a little overpowered by your strong older sister? She'd say, oh no, I liked it because every time anybody caused trouble, they always knew it was her, not me. She said, so I was 5 years ahead. So I started kindergarten, but when she was still just a toddler. But when I came home from school every day in kindergarten and first grade, I would teach her exactly what I learned at school. And so by the time she got to school, she skipped the first grade entirely. So we have a good relationship now.
That's great. So being raised in such, of course, imperfect, but great childhood and strong in faith, what did that look like for you as far as your teen years and college years? Did you have any kind of testing or ownership of your faith?
Oh boy. Well, seventh grade is rough for everybody. And my dad was really into tracks, the tracks that you would leave.
I remember those. This was your life. My favorite.
Yes. And so he put them everywhere. And when we moved to Reno, it was just before seventh grade. I was dog ugly. I was shy. I was, just awkward at age. But I figured that I would do what my dad did. And before homeroom one day, before everybody came into class, I put a tract down on everybody's desk. And I got in huge trouble. They called my dad. They were going to expel me for doing that. And I was just shocked. We had come from Denver, Midwest, which was not anything like that. But this was rough territory. And so I was painfully shy, I felt ugly. It was just, I felt completely inferior. For that 7th and 8th grade was probably the toughest ever, just trying to adjust to slot machines in the bathrooms of restaurants and everything else, on top of wondering what in the world's happening to me. I didn't question my faith, but I sure questioned myself. I didn't have any self-esteem at all, other than at home. But you outgrow it. And you know what saved me in my high school years? We moved to Las Vegas, kind of go from Sodom to Gomorrah. And we moved right before my junior year of high school. Las Vegas was even rougher than Reno in many ways, and very tough for Christians. But I loved the Christian bookstore there. And I went and as soon as we moved there, I spent as much time as I could at the Christian bookstore. And one day, Mrs. Shine, the owner, as I was checking out, she goes, "You really love this place, don't you?" I said, "I do. Here, I'm 16, right?" And she goes, "Would you like to work here?" And I went, "Oh, are you kidding? I would love to work here." So I worked at the Christian bookstore half a day during my senior year, and then every vacation coming back from college. And I spent most of my paycheck on the new stuff that came in. But, it was the way that God kept me grounded and totally surrounded in the city of sin. I was surrounded and grounded and focused on Christ. The Jesus music coming in, the bump honk if you love Jesus, the Way, the Living Bible, all the things, all the music groups that came through. I got in on that part instead of, it would have been so easy to fall away into the secular part. But God had a plan, and that's where he kept me, in the hollow of his hand, right there at Christian Supply Center, Las Vegas, Nevada.
Wow, what a blessing to hear how he preserved you and just gave your heart and mind something to do. Probably answering the prayers of your parents to keep you. That job was probably an answer to many of their prayers.
Yes, they prayed, yes. And that's the other thing they taught me about prayers. I heard them pray out loud for us every day, morning and night. They had devotions on their own as well as with us. And my dad would very quickly, if we had an issue or a problem, he'd say, let's pray about this. Let's find out what God wants us to do. And so I grew up believing that's what you did. That if you didn't have any idea what to do, you always went to God. My dad, he reflected that constantly, and I'll always be grateful for that. You cannot underestimate the power of your parents, especially your dad, and the power of example, watching them pray. Even now, my prayer is when Dad, in his older years, as I'm taking him places and stuff, he'd be kind of whispering, and he was kind of constantly talking, and I realized he's praying. He's constantly praying. He's got this constant conversation with God, passing this accident scene. And he'd say, "Oh, Lord, please bless those people in that scene and cover them with your hand." And so I thought, what a great way to pray, to have God so close as a friend that you could just be talking to him instantly and go, "Oh, Lord, I don't know about this. I hope you guide me. This is what I want to do." And that was just an amazing gift of my parents.
Absolutely. And it's something I've thought about so much just through the pandemic and beyond, with everyone being so isolated and not being around people, the visual impact, the parenting that happens when we're not saying anything. When I'm sitting in the living room this morning with my Bible, having our family devotions, and my 16-year-old, before he heads out to school, runs down, gets dressed, comes, and I'm still sitting there with my Bible. The impact of what people see is even greater now because people are so isolated and alone. And there's so much that happens that we feel like, sometimes as a mom, you think your impact isn't making a difference. Or I look at my husband, who's not one of those showy people. I don't think I've ever heard him talk negative about any family member ever. But I just look at my husband's faith and I just think, Lord, you're going to bring them all around. How can you not? And I know each one of them will probably have the family devotions like we've had. And
even if they don't right away, the Lord has promised his word will not return void at some point. They go through their phases, and sometimes rebellion and sometimes misdirection. But I really believe that the word will not return void.
Amen. And I'm sure many of, the impression your parents left on you really helped shape you as a parent. And I know you have 2 sons and you got married, your first marriage at some point. So how did that come about?
Well, I was single for quite a while. I was a police officer for a few years. And as I taught high school.
You're a police officer while you were teaching high school?
I was teaching high school. And always from the time I started teaching in Idaho with high school, I thought, I just want to make sure that I'm really preparing these kids for the real world, for what it is. So every summer, instead of taking summers off, I would go work at a temporary job so that I got back in the corporate world to find out, are they learning what they need to learn? So one summer, I took a ride along with a Christian friend who was a Normandy Park police officer. And it just was like somebody, I just was like it was in my bloodstream. I thought, oh my goodness, I have to do this for a while. I want to be a cop. And so I applied for it. And they told me, quite frankly, thanks anyway, we just don't want a woman. And I said, well, I don't want you to hire me because I'm a woman. I just think I could be a good cop. I mean, I'm not asking for any favors of any kind. I don't want you to, I think I could do the job. And one of the sergeants there that was talking to me, he said, did you grow up in kind of a goody two-shoes sort of background? I said, well, my dad's a preacher. Why? He goes, really? So do you swear? I said, no, I don't use profanity. He said, well, can you? I said, why do you ask? And he said, because you can't be a cop and not swear and use profanity. And I said, well, I think he said, are you willing to try? I went, I don't think I could do it. No, my greatest gift was sarcasm, which as a kid, they don't call it a gift. They call it all kinds of smart aleck back talk. But I found, as a police officer, because they did hire me, I found that for me, sarcasm worked better than profanity. And I worked 6 years as a cop and never did have to swear, although I got in trouble for too smart a mouth occasionally, because the sarcasm saved me, And plus, I was doing full-time summer police work and part-time during the school year. So I would do evenings and weekends a lot of times while I was teaching. And then when I would get back in the classroom, man, I could have done an altar call once in a while because I got to talk to them about, what did you do, Miss Ulrich? What did you do this weekend? And, tell them about the prom date that ended so tragically because they decided to drink and not go. And, so I was, again, then later in life, in my job as an author and speaker, of course, I've been a police officer for 6 years, so I get the opportunity to work with first responders and military, and because I've been there and because I've walked the walk, the Lord knew that would make me more credible to reach an audience that's very difficult for many people to reach or actually be considered credible to.
Can you share maybe just one story, one of your police stories that just really impacted you personally?
It's a long story, but I'll tell you one that really impacted me. They had a summer job that they really needed an undercover cop for. Just across the street in the old retirement home, kind of old folks home to me, there's the dining room supervisor is selling drugs to Mount Rainier High School kids who are working there. She's their supervisor, and her boyfriend is the drug dealer, and she's actually not giving good schedules to anybody who doesn't buy drugs from her. So we need somebody to go in, get hired, work with her, make your way into her life so that she'll trust you and then lead her to her drug dealer boyfriend. And they said, it needs to be a woman, and you're the only woman. And I went, I can't do that. I know how this works because I've been a cop for a year. I know that if you're going to try to get in undercover drugs, you have to use the language. You have to swear. You have to talk the language. And even if I'm willing to, I don't think I could. I would never be convincing. He said, well, you're a drama teacher. You'll figure out something. I went, well, wait, there's another problem. One thing I know about drugs, first of all, you have to sample them and you have to go out for drinks, right? So you got to go out for drinks. I've never had an alcoholic beverage in my life. I said, even if I were willing to drink alcohol, one drink, and she would know. They're going to bust me. And I'm going to be in trouble, and they'll probably kill me because we have no way of knowing, how bad this drug dealer guy is. And they said, well, it's okay. You'll figure it out. We really need you. And so they sent me home with a whole stack of High Times magazine, right, to study because I knew nothing about marijuana and all the, the BC and the bud and all that stuff. So I did my homework, took on an assumed identity. They suggested my sisters because that way I would answer to the name. I got glasses, which I didn't wear at the time. I wore contacts that just were plain glasses. And I wore clothing a little bit too tight, and I went by Sandy instead of my real name. And so we get ready, and I have to go in and actually do the interview and get hired. Nobody's going to know who I am over there. Nobody. I don't have a weapon. I don't have any ID as a police officer. So she loved me right away. she gave me the tour of the place. She goes, here's the pantry, and anytime if you want to bake chocolate chip cookies at home or whatever, just take stuff out of here, because these are old people. They're never going to notice. And downstairs, she showed me the storage where all the elderly people had their stuff. She goes, we take stuff from here all the time. They're never going to miss it if you see something you like. So anyway, as we're talking the next couple days, and she said something about, hey, so hey, my boyfriend Doug, he had come and he had dropped off some baggies or something, and I said, oh, that's kind of interesting. She goes, yeah, my boyfriend Doug, he brings by some marijuana, sometimes a little more for my friends. And I go, oh, that's interesting. I said, my boyfriend Mike and we just moved here.
My husband's name.
From Idaho, and he still hasn't. He kind of got me hooked on the stuff, but we really haven't found a good supplier here. She goes, oh, no problem. She goes, my Doug will set you up. And she goes, I'll tell you what, today, Ray, the dishwasher, we toke up all the time after we've served the old people lunch. And so we just go out and toke up in the garden out there. And then we, take peppermints, and they never even suspect a thing. What? Today, after lunch, you can just come out with us and try it, and if you like it. So my mind is racing, and I said, well, I got to tell you, Mike, he's a little bit, it's not like he's real abusive, but since he's the one that first took me, he would be insanely jealous if he found out I did it without him with me. And in my head, I'm thinking, she's not buying that. She's not going to buy that. She goes, that's the weirdest thing. She goes, Doug is the same way. He would be really unhappy if he knew that we did that. She goes, I tell you what, let's just go out. You and I will go out after work and for drinks. And I said, that's great. Sure, I'd enjoy that. And I'm thinking, she said, I got to tell you one thing, though. She said, I got so drunk on Jack Daniels last weekend that I'm off the booze for a couple of weeks. I'm just drinking Diet Coke. And I went, I appreciate that. I'll do that, too, because I'm on a diet anyway, and it's good for me not to drink. And so I'm washing down tables and stuff, and one of the other employees comes up and he says, you're not a cop, are you? And I look at him and go, do I look like a cop? I just had to check, he said. 'Cause there was something about me that didn't want to outright lie, even though I'm going by an assumed name. And I'm thinking, Lord, you have to just help me through this.
Give me the words.
And so anyway, over the next few days, her boyfriend would deliver the stuff. I would buy it from her. I would get in my car, drive around and around and around, get back to my apartment, call the cop shop. They would send a police car over. I would crawl into the back seat, out of sight. They would drive me into the garage of the police station, and I would make all my reports and turn in all my evidence and stuff. Well, after, probably 2 weeks of this, Mary said, hey, I tell you what, you and your boyfriend, Doug's just got this big shipment coming in of cocaine. If you want, he'll hook you guys up big time if you want. And I said, that would be great. She said, tell you what, we'll meet Saturday. Come get us. And the four of us will go out. We'll party a little, and then we'll toke up, and then we'll get you hooked up. So I said, yeah, that'd be great. So that night, going to the cop shop, my sergeant, I went, okay, listen, I have been able to get by with everything so far because you weren't there. He was the one that I was pretending was my boyfriend. I said, this time you're going to be there. There will be the four of us. We will be there. There will be no excuse for me not to smoke, to drink, to toke up. He said, here's what we could do. We could just pretend that we had a big party the night before and that you're sick. I went, I'm not going to have to pretend to be sick, because I can tell you right now, I'm already sick just thinking about this. We didn't even know how bad this guy is, right? And so he said, don't worry, we'll just wing it. And I'm thinking, this is the end. I'm going to get shot. We're going to get killed because they're going to make who we are.
Bye, Mom and Dad. You've been great. Yeah.
And so we went to the apartment that Saturday morning. Mary came out the door alone, and she got in the car, and we said, where's Doug? And she goes, it's the weirdest thing. She goes, we're on our way out the door. And all of a sudden he starts puking like crazy. She goes, he's I don't know, he's sick or whatever. He's just puking up his guts. She goes, we'll just have to do it another day. But I've got all the information for you. And we'll set up another time to actually meet. Later that Monday, we had to go ahead and make the arrest because I had to get back in uniform and all these other things. So we made the arrest. She was in the holding cell, of course, making choice words for me. And I felt bad. I really did. I never wanted to do that again. To pretend she thought I was a friend, to pretend it was not me, the undercover thing. So anyway, we're back and I'm in the sergeant's office and he's looking out the window because Doug, her boyfriend, has come to make bail. They haven't really arrested him yet. And he says to me, hey, that guy right there, is that her boyfriend? And I said, yeah, that's Doug. He goes, oh man, if he'd have showed up Saturday, he would have made me in a minute. We went to school together. He knows I'm a cop.
Wow.
Okay. It was like that was one of those miraculous things, step after step after step, totally improbable that I could pull this off, that it had to be God. One of those stories. So, I mean, that's the long story.
That's incredible.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing how the Lord kept you. And so did that kind of, you worked for the police force 6 years and you taught the same amount, and then
I taught the first 3 years in Idaho and then 5 years up here. And then, so at the end of, before I finished teaching, I was working on my master's degree, and I was trying to do all these things at once. And so I decided I needed a job for a couple of years that wasn't teaching so that I would not have to be constantly thinking and grading papers and planning. So for the last 2 years before I got married, I was a paralegal for an attorney in downtown Seattle. And then I would start work at 6, get off at 2, go up to Seattle Pacific University, take my classes, do the homework, come back and still try to work some evenings and weekends as a police officer. And
I know you have 2 wonderful sons. And
twin boys, yeah.
Twin boys.
They just turned 31.
31. Wow. Yeah, my oldest is 31 also. So what was marriage and motherhood like for you?
It was practice what you preach, Cindy, the Lord said. Because I thought, I went in for the ultrasound the first when we got pregnant. And she said, oh, is this your first child? And we said, yes. She goes, how many do you want to have altogether? We said 2. She goes, well, congratulations, you've got them. And I'm thinking, oh, my goodness. And trying to prepare with twins. And it's like God sent me my own in-home laboratory, right, of no two alike. They look like Pete and repeat, even now, really. But they're totally opposite in learning style. One is very strong-willed. One's very compliant. They were so different. Still, I was working. I had retired from teaching, so to speak, quit teaching, and started my own business doing internship through Seattle Pacific and with parents and teachers. And so now I opened my own business and began to work. And in 1992, I think it was, I got a phone call from Focus on the Family. The boys were like 1.5 years old. And they said, we've seen some of your handouts and some of your seminars on strong-willed child and learning styles, and especially the learning styles we're interested in. Wonder, would you be interested in writing a book for us? And I said, let me think about it, yes. And so my very first book, The Way They Learn, has a lot of illustrations about the twins, the boys. I mean, because here I had them, I'd lived with them, not only high school kids that I'd taught, but now I had babies, toddlers, all through the years. And so it was, again, God saying, oh, you like the on-the-job training? Here you go.
And you have so many great books, 14 books, and they're all on Amazon and also on CynthiaTobias.com. Yeah, you can link out to all of her books there. And she also has some really incredible resources, a lot of great free resources. So CynthiaTobias.com. But if you go on Amazon, then you should look up Cynthia Ulrich, Ulrich Tobias, and that's where you'll find it. But also it's really cool. is that, you have the audiobooks as well. So for somebody who's on the go with strong-willed kids, you can get the Audible books.
And I have an author page also on Facebook, which put up kind of fun memes and occasional videos. But that's under Cynthia Tobias on Facebook.
As when you were parenting your kids, was it, did you find it tougher to put some of your principles into practice, being a strong-willed parent?
No, I got on the job training with that. It's like what goes around comes around, right? I found out the hard way as a parent, strong-willed mom. I would say things that I knew in a million years I'd never do. But I have no reverse gear, right? Strong will, you have no reverse gear. So I learned the hard way in many ways how to deal with Mike. And one of the real rewards with Mike, my strong-willed child, not only did I get to try out a lot of things on him, find out what worked, but we're very close even now. And the first You Can't Make Me, But I Can Be Persuaded came out in 1999. And Mike, by then, was 8 or 9 years old. The revised edition, and my favorite edition so far, came out in 2012 when he was actually 20 or 21. He was doing camp counselor and some of those things. And he came home at one summer. And he said, "Oh, Mom, those kids are driving me crazy, especially the strong-willed ones. They're really driving me crazy." And he said, "I got so frustrated, I finally decided I better read one of your books." And I thought, "Oh, which one did you read, Mike?" He goes, "You Can't Make Me." I said, "Really? So what'd you think?" He goes, "Mom, it's really good. I really learned a lot." And he said, he's actually the forward of the current edition of You Can't Make Me. His story, and that's the best endorsement I could ever ask for, is a strong-willed kid who looks back and says, "Yeah, this is what works."
What was one of your biggest battles with Mike?
Well, early on, I learned, for instance, when he was 4 years old, his toys strewn all over the floor, and I would tell him to pick them up. Finally, one day I said, "Mike, if you don't pick up these toys, I'm going to give them to other kids." And in his 4-year-old stature, he stood full up and looked at me and said, "Give them to other kids." Well, I'm thinking, those are some of my favorite toys. They're expensive toys, but a deal's a deal. So I collected them. I put them in a garbage bag and took them to Compassionate Ministries at church. And Mike, he's 31 now, and he still hasn't asked me where they went. He never asked to have them replaced. He knew full well what the price would be, stood up and paid it. And that's, I got several of those kind of wake-up calls thinking, whoa, I am up against something that's strong as me, if not stronger. And then, even through his teenage years, the okay, that magic word, was so effective compared to, I learned that you just don't give ultimatums. And when he came home once and got, a detention for something he'd done, instead of saying, "I can't believe you did this, Mike. You knew better than this. What were you thinking?" I asked him, I said, "Is this what you were going for?" He goes, "No, it did not turn out at all like I thought it would turn out." I said, "Really? So what were you thinking that would turn out like?" And we were talking, and I said, "Well, you probably already thought about how you're going to make it right." He goes, "Yeah, I know. I got to go back." And, so we had this relationship where I was more careful not to point a finger or to, in fact, I made a list this morning because I'm speaking at an event not too long from now about strong-willed adults and kids. And, there are certain trigger phrases that if you use it, we will both go down in flames.
We would love to hear those.
No one will win. I'll give you just a few. And this is for kids or adults. So the first one is calm down. You just need to calm down. Things are going to get worse. That's just not going to happen. Oh, really? Right? I see. You just have to have everything your own way. Because I said so. That's why. That never works. You better, and if you don't, and or else, anytime you better do it or else. Because my immediate reaction as a strong-willed person is going to be, or else what? Because I'm measuring in my head. Might be worth it, whatever the consequence is. Must be nice to know it all. Don't be so sensitive. That's with adults. Those are phrases that I'm not going to work with you very well if you talk to me like that, or something like, hurry up.
Right.
You better clean this mess up. You died and made you my God, or parent, or whatever. So
yeah.
it's learning to ask more questions instead of just bark out the orders. It's not authority that strong-willed kids of any age have problems with. It's how it's communicated. And if you come across like you're the big boss, I beg to differ. You are not the big boss of me, because I can choose to die if I want to. I know we're both dead, but I get to go first, and you can't make me do what you think you want me to do. So it's been a real experience.
What are just a couple of quick ways where we could ask more questions?
Well, instead of saying, get in the van now, we are late, you could say, hey, you about ready to go? No, I need to drink water first. Okay, then we'll leave in a minute. Okay. Yeah. Even just saying something like, when they say something outrageous and you go, nice try. That's not going to happen, right? And you always smile, right? Because there's something weird about, even when you tell them something they don't want to hear, and even if your smile's not that genuine, if you smile at the end of it, they laugh or smile, and they hate themselves for doing it. So just asking the question instead of saying, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? Say, there had to be a good reason you did that, right? So that it comes in the back door just a little bit. You go to bed right now. It's past your bedtime. You get in bed right now. Hey, you ready to go to bed? No, I don't want to go to bed. Okay, a drink? What do you need right before you go to bed? And then you might negotiate a little or not. But you start with the question and the benefit of the doubt and a choice, right? In a way, I mean, I need you, you have to get that garbage taken out by 8 tonight. Yeah, okay, by 8 tonight. And then it's almost 8. It's time to take the garbage out. Instead of saying, it's 8 o'clock, I told you to do it. You say, hey, were you going to take that garbage out by 8? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot. That's a lot of times. If you just give me the benefit of the doubt instead of the bony finger, I'm going to respond and work with you.
Because what's easy to do is with a strong-willed child, you think they just don't want to do anything I say. They don't, but they actually do.
We do. We just don't. We don't want to do it if it means that I have to capitulate because you're the big boss. If you're my dictator and you say, listen, let me just tell you how it's going to be, okay? Mm-hmm. This is what you're going to do. This is what needs to be done, and you need to get doing it right now. Well, now we're going to fight because I was on my way to do it. I actually was. But now I can't do it because if I do it, that would mean that you get by with your dictatorial, authoritarian orders and commands instead of treating me like a person. So even at a young age, I figured that out, right? That I want to be talked to. Just talk to me like you want me to talk to you. That's a real big key. I'm watching you for examples. Talk to me the way you would want to be talked to. You wouldn't say to your best friend who comes in, hey, close the door behind you. I can't believe you keep that door open every time. You wouldn't say that to your friend. They wouldn't want to hang around with you. So try to talk to your child more like, whoa, I need you to close the door. Even if you just say that, oh, sorry, I'm going to do it, right? How many times do I have to tell you to close the door? That's not going to work. Going, did you forget to close the door again? Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot to go. I mean, you make it as no big deal. Now, one thing to remember, though, it's never escape from consequences. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, there will be accountability and consequences. So, you don't want to ever be pleading or, please, I really just need you to do this, okay? Well, that's weakness. If you're weak and tentative with me, I have to fight my instinct to kill you, right? To destroy you. I'm going to run over you if I can. So just say it firmly and kindly and then follow through. If I still say, no, I'm not going to do it, say, you understand the consequences are this, right? I'm not going to do it. Okay, then here we go. And just remember that those who anger you control you. so that if you end up yelling or screaming, then you've just lost control of that situation and you're never going to get it back. So just keep your voice steady and even, and like a broken record sometimes. Hey, we're going to get ice cream as soon as you clean up your bedroom. I'm not going to clean up my bedroom. It's not fair. You can't make me clean up my bedroom. I don't want to. Well, we're going to get ice cream as soon as you finish cleaning your bedroom, okay? I told you I'm not going to clean my bedroom. I don't know. Okay, but as soon as the bedroom's clean, we'll go and get the ice cream. I mean, you say that over and over, and pretty soon, fine, just stop talking. Just shut up. Don't talk to me anymore. I'll clean my stupid room, right? So, but it's you. The more even you can keep your voice, the more calm you can keep your voice, regardless of the fact they're screaming at you, the more you have control of that situation. And at some point you can say, you know what? I think we're too upset to go on with this. I think we need a break, and then we'll continue this in a few minutes. I can't talk to you in this tone of voice. I'll see you in a few minutes.
I remember somebody saying to me, and this helped me keep my cool, when you lose it, now all they see is, oh, mommy just turned into a monster, and they're no longer listening to what you're saying.
Right. Not only that, with their siblings, the next thing you know, they're in there yelling and screaming at their brother or sister because they figured that's how it's done.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know that as you went along, I mean, the Lord was just growing your ministry and so many books and speaking engagements and with focus on the family. And you shared with me that while all that was going on, things were a little more difficult at home.
Yeah, it was interesting because my first husband, was working as a kind of a business manager and working to do, to book me. He'd lost several jobs in a row over 18 months. And so we were just working together. And then we were in San Francisco. I was working for a thing for Kaiser Permanente. And we were at a dinner afterwards, I don't dance very well, but they were having this dance. And so we were at the kind of moving around the floor. And I said, we had a little argument about something. And I said, well, do you want me to lie about that? And he goes, yeah, I've lied to you thousands of times. And it was it was like the world stood still for a second. And he must have seen the expression on my face because he said, well, I don't really call it, it's not really lying. It's just, telling you what I know you want to hear. And that began after 17 years of marriage. The whole foundation sort of slipped out, right? Because then some other jarring discoveries came out. We went through counseling because there was no way when would I ever consider divorce? That was just unheard of, unthinkable. The evidence and the things that came out were just it didn't appear that he was willing when things, and I won't go into detail, but when the boys actually became sort of in danger, not from him, but from some of his actions, then I knew with the biblical grounds that he had demonstrated that the marriage was going to end. And I was really, I've never had such brokenness, and I was just, it blindsided me. And so it was a very ugly, contentious, it's nothing I can even describe because it was so foreign. I had never, ever anticipated this. The boys were 12 years old. So after the divorce, for the next 4 years, I was a single mom with junior high boys. My parents were right next door. It was very helpful. They got me through it too. I had a very supportive family, but it was a real time of brokenness from going to this very self-sufficient and competent and, financially stable person to losing a lot of money and some reputation. And some of the things everything that I had built felt like it was going to collapse. And the Lord said, and I remember listening to a radio show when I was trying to keep things together. And one night on my way back from the airport, and I heard a pastor saying, God doesn't come to fix your kingdom. He comes to give you his kingdom, a new kingdom. And that was a turning point for me to realize I have to surrender, truly surrender everything, and be willing to lose everything in order to really become who I'm supposed to become. So I've never been through anything like that. And the brokenness was complete. The self-sufficiency was gone. And it was one of the most devastating and exhilarating times of my life. I've never been closer to my Abba Father. I watched how God kept me and protected me against all odds.
I know divorce is can be a tough topic. How did it impact your ministry?
From the very beginning, I wanted to be very transparent. I had booked a women's conference, and I was an author for Focus on the Family. I was working with King Schools and Krista. So I called each of those places, Family Life Today and others, to let them know what the situation was, that I had gone through as much reconciliation and counseling to try to save this marriage that I could, that it didn't appear he wanted it saved. And so only the women's conference that was that weekend, they told me immediately that, well, we don't let divorced people talk to us. So they canceled the 250 women, and that was hard. But I said, I understand. I wouldn't have wanted to go and had him find out later, and think that I had some way tried to betray them. Krista Ministries and King Schools, Jim Gwynn was the president at the time. He was wonderful. Of course, Focus on the Family was very supportive. Overall, I don't think my business suffered. The Lord had been very clear with me during the divorce. Take the high road. Always take the high road. You do not speak against their dad to the boys. Each time there was a court appearance, my parents and I would meet for prayer beforehand. We never prayed for victory. We prayed for the truth to be revealed. And if there was any way that this could change, that we wanted. So we kept Christ in the center. Even when it was painful, we kept him in the center. And in the end, I know that God honored that. I lost a lot, but I gained so much. At the end of 4 years after being divorced, the Lord brought me quite unexpectedly this man that I'm married to now, Jack Talley. He's a wonderful Christian man. He actually told me on our first date, because I said on the first date, my life is kind of chaotic. I've got boys that are juniors in high school. They're going to be going into their senior year. I'm worth more dead than alive financially right now. I'm struggling to keep my business alive. I am not the kind of burden that I would put on anybody. I need to get this straightened out.
What a great first date.
So I, it was real nice. But at the end I said, so I'm releasing you because we'd had a lot of conversations on the phone and, a month or two of correspondence. But I said, I just really I can't do this to anybody. And I really appreciate you. And he reached over and he took my hand and he said, I believe God sent me to you. And we talked about that since then, because he said, that's not the way I talk. And I heard myself say that. And I never say that, because I would never have said that. He said, but it was true. And the Lord and that was the only thing he could have said that resonated with me, right? Because I felt that not only through the touch of the hand, but as soon as he said, I believe the Lord sent me to you, I knew that it was true. I felt it. I felt the Lord say, this is a man after God's own heart. I have sent him to you. And so it turned out we complemented. He had been severely hurt emotionally through a divorce. He was looking for a strong Christian, a good Christian woman, a church girl, which, I said, you're going to get that in spades, a good Christian church girl. So it was truly a match made in heaven. I'm not saying everything idyllic, but it could only be God, the way that we got together, the way that and he had been looking for a small ministry to support, because he wanted to kind of do that on the side. I said, I actually have a small ministry that could use some support, Apple Street. And he loved what I did. He loved what the ministry was about. He loved the company. And he brought his business manager acumen to the ministry. And it's just been amazing to watch how God has blessed us. When I look back at the last 14 years that I've been married to Jack, and I think about all the audiences that I got to talk to, I'm just incredibly humbled because I know that God had a message. I know that he needed me to deliver a message to different places. Everywhere I go before I speak, I pray, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. I do this for him. I do this for him. And it's not me. It's him. It's not me. I couldn't have done any of this without him. He gives the words. He gives the opportunities. He makes the way. And I never cease to be amazed and awed by what he's doing. I'll do it as long as he wants me to. I've done work all over the world. I was able to do some training for China and the Asia Pacific last year. The Christians in China are just an amazing, blessed group under persecution. When we were there in 2015, they told us, we pray for you in America that you would be persecuted more so that you could come closer to Christ. Wow. And I said, wow, don't pray that too much. And we laughed about that a little bit. But, if you look, the harder you're persecuted, the closer you come to Christ or the further you walk away. There's really not much in between. For this road trip that we're doing, I'm ending up doing the Focus on the Family Employee Chapel. We're doing it on how to have healthy conflict in adults, because sometimes it's the strong-willed adults that are driving you crazy. And I just love the people so much there. Focus, my friends and publishers, and what they do is also such a wonderful ministry, because I watch the sacrifice. I watch how much is put in to God's work with no expectation of self-aggrandizement, no expectation of self-elevation, but only truly and purely, how do I get the message that God wants me to get? How do I get it out there? And how will I know that they got it? Well, sometimes I won't. Oswald Chambers says that one of the greatest privileges of being a Christian is that God lets us be answers to other people's prayers, sometimes prayed centuries ago. And if we just follow him, sometimes we were just a tiny little answer, right? Just a little cog, a little way on the, a little thing on the way, a blip on the way. But we have I don't want to call it an obligation, a privilege of being used by God in ways that we have no idea of. If we just walk with him, stay right in that light that he's given us. It's amazing. I'm more in love with the Lord than I've ever been in my life. And it's getting deeper every day.
Praise the Lord. And would you say, Cynthia, is there a verse that, just means a lot to you or sums up your story?
I would say Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. I write it and autograph it in every book. It's been that way since my very first book. And that is, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Obviously, we want to do that. And then lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. All your ways. We're so different in so many ways. We serve him in different ways. We think in different ways. We learn in different ways. But in all our ways, the bottom line is we acknowledge God. And he cannot bless us. He will bless us inside that and cannot bless us outside that as much. But it's been a life verse, something he's proven over and over and over again, sometimes in obvious miracles, sometimes in small ways. But he has never failed, and he never will. I'm his for life.
Before we seal up the envelope on this letter of encouragement, we have prepared a little treat for you that we like to call the PS. so you can see more of the heart and personality of our guest.
Here is your P.S.
All right. Are you ready for some bonus questions?
I'm ready.
Do you have any party tricks?
My husband has a party trick. He doesn't consider it a trick. If you go on YouTube and you enter Jack Talley shows you how to eat a cupcake, that's a pretty good party trick.
Okay. I'm sure people are downloading that like while they're listening to the end. I mean, why wouldn't they?
It's short and quite revealing.
I'm in, my sons, they did, they're big, football players. So they did like lineman cooking channel. So I've got my, 200-pound, one of my sons is 6'4.5", like another one's playing, but you watching them make breakfast burritos. I'm like, you know what? They were listening. They wash their hands. I'm like, okay, I guess they're getting manners, but I love that. I'm definitely going to look up the cupcake channel. Is there a name that is special to you?
Well, I think it would be the name of my dad, Robert Ulrich. And the reason that all of my books have Cynthia Tobias is he never had a son. And he was so proud of me. At 91, he was promoting my middle school book, right? Saying everybody needs this book. He was such a champion and prayer warrior, and I wanted to honor him by always having his name with mine in every single book. His 90th birthday, I asked him, and I've got this on video. I said, "Dad, you have anything left on your bucket list?" He goes, "Oh, yes." He said, "I want to win one more soul." Now that's my dad. Every time you talk to him, and he would, everywhere he went, into the Department of Licensing. How are you this morning, Mr. Ulrich? "I'm great. You know why? Because Jesus is my Savior. Do you know Jesus?" And I would be with him going, Dad. He'd sit down in the VA waiting room, and he'd turn to the guy next to him and say, "You know how important it is to go to heaven, don't you?" I go, "Dad." And the guy said, "Well, yeah, I think so." He was unashamed. And he said toward the end of his life, he said, "Oh man, I just don't feel like I've won that one more soul." I said, "Dad, are you kidding me? Everywhere you go, you plant the seeds. You talk about Jesus. You're an ambassador for God everywhere. You have no way of knowing how many souls have been won." He said, "Boy, I sure hope so."
Amen. Wish I could meet him, actually. Yeah.
In heaven. We'll meet him in heaven, that's for sure.
You talked about revival, and I know part of what you're doing is sharing in your ministry, just hoping God really does a great movement. How could we see revival in our churches in America?
Kind of, I've been a trustee for my university the last 5 years and made some jarring discoveries there. One of the things that the Lord's really led me into, not just my university, but universities in general, Christian universities, as well as Christian churches and denominations, to see the shift, to see the drift away from Orthodox biblical holiness perspective, to watch the slippery slope of some of the wokeism and some of the progressive Christianity has been, I think it's been devastating. And one of the things that God has led me down the path that I'm working on now is working to see about how we can right the ship, if there is any righting of the ship. And it's true of our churches and our Christian universities. We have to be careful. The progressive shift that says it's not so important that the Bible is truly true. It's just kind of a guide. Jesus, he doesn't ever, we're going to skip the part about obey my commandments and just look at the love part. And we're going to accept a lot of things that we wouldn't normally accept. And what are we going to teach our children? One of my defining moments was one of the theologians that did a quick video and said, "I believe that God never gives up and that even after you die, he still works with you." And so, essentially, you don't have to worry if you're not right with God before you die. Well, that was galvanizing to me because we're talking about eternity. We're talking about eternal souls. And Oswald Chambers, again, he says, most Christians, they're not tempted to sin. Christians aren't tempted to sin. Their sin isn't lying and cheating and stealing. It's getting their eyes and their focus off of Jesus. And as soon as your focus begins to shift from that solid biblical standard, all kinds of things can happen. And what worries me is, and especially in today's climate, what we're doing with our children when we're talking about their eternal souls. So I feel very strongly about that, trusting the Lord. That's the kind of revival that we need, is not squishy. The revival that says we get back to alignment with God, with the Holy Spirit, with the Lord, with Jesus Christ as our Savior. There are all these ideas that, was there really an atonement, and is it really necessary? And it's stay true, true north. That's what I'm praying for and working on.
Man, boy, that's really good. I'm sure you've heard of the phrase, the great resignation. People have left jobs in droves and are just moving or just working at home. I guess, what would you say to Christians who are struggling with a lack of motivation post-pandemic?
Well, one of the biggest antidotes for depression is to go out and do something for someone else. That doesn't cost anything. It doesn't need a prescription. That's one of the biggest things. And one of the things I'll tell you, Meg, that I've noticed, and I've had several talk to me about, the children after this pandemic, the kids from kindergarten to second grade, are having a hard time adjusting, coming back into the classrooms. The isolation was devastating. The masks were devastating. They're afraid they've grown up with masks. That's all. They haven't seen people's faces. They don't know how to make an expression. They don't know how to communicate through their facial expression as well as their words. And the isolation has been devastating. Teachers are quitting. Working remotely is so tempting, right? So tempting. And yet, for many people, it's just the worst thing in the world. We need contact. We need to be in church. Mm-hmm. We need the fellowship with each other. We need to have human contact, not just digital contact. And I think it's a real challenge, and it's gonna take a lot for us to get back on an even keel with that.
Yeah, and I think also, Cynthia, so many people that I've talked to are just going through hard times, like big issues, several deaths in families, kids being diagnosed with special needs, violence in the home, all kinds of big things happening in their lives and brokenness. And what can you say to people that are going through the most difficult time of their lives?
Go to the rock, the one hope of our salvation, the one hope of our eternal soul, that this isn't as good as it gets. This isn't all there is. And the antidote for depression, for discouragement, for isolation is to go to the rock. Jesus is our rock. He hides our soul in the cleft of the rock. We're in the hollow of his hand. If you don't deepen your faith vertically in Jesus Christ, ground your relationship with him before you go out horizontally, you'll be suffering and you won't. Find a fellowship. Find a mentor. Be part of a Christian fellowship. Because if you're trying to do it on your own or trust the secular world to feed what you need in your soul, it isn't there. The Word of God, the fellowship of Christians, that's where you're going to get your hope. There is no eternal hope apart from that. What are you going to believe in? Believe in something that will never change. The same, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, forever. You can go through all amounts of brokenness and lose everything else. But on Christ, the solid rock, I stand. And I know I have a hope. I know I have a future. They can't steal your soul. They can steal your body. Your body might die, but your soul does not have to. We have to hold on to that, and we have to communicate that to our kids especially. This is our one great hope, is in Jesus Christ.
I trust you are encouraged by Cynthia's story and wisdom. So many great takeaways. I love how her father loved her and all the examples that she shared of him just quietly, lovingly, consistently, firmly being that presence in her childhood and really in her life. And just wrapping our minds around having a strong-willed child, what a blessing that could be. And I'm praying for us today that whoever that person is in our life that seems maybe 5 times harder than the next, that we are just believing God for great things. If you would like a bonus peek into the Letters from Home happenings, sign up for our newsletter. We won't clutter your inbox, promise. Just one splashy email per month.
Links from our guests will be in the show notes. For more everyday extraordinary faith stories, go to our website, lettersfromhomepodcast.com, and click subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're listening to.
2 Corinthians 3:3. And you show that you are a letter from Christ, delivered by us, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts.
Until next time.